All right, chapter 1, section 5A. We're going to do part 2. So we're going to start on verse 17. I cannot impress upon you enough, guys, that you pay attention to this right here. Pull the negative out by bringing an I first, then simplify. The only difference between what we're doing today and what we did in the second week of school with simplifying radicals is pulling the negative out. You need to understand, when I look at number 17, the way that I want to see this, I want you to write out, this is -1 times 3 underneath the radical. I know you guys see the negative and you think I want you to get in the habit right now of separating it, because when the problems become a little more complex, you're going to forget that -1, what is the square root of -1? It's I. So your answer here would be I square root of 3. Please do not put the I behind. When you guys do that, the I ends up underneath the radical and then it's wrong. This is the answer. If you guys on your quiz answer the square root of -3, you tell me it's the square root of 3, it's wrong. It's not, oh, I forgot the I, it's a couple points off. The whole lesson, the whole concept of this, guys, is imaginary because there's a negative underneath the radical. So, quote unquote, forgetting the I is a majority of the points off because that's what this whole chapter is about, this whole section. So please pay attention to that. If you look at number 18, separate it first so you don't make a silly mistake. -1 times 16. You guys did not put the square root on. It doesn't say x squared equals, so you're not going to have two answers. You just simplify what's given to you. So what is the square root of -1? I. What's the square root of 16? 4. So what's your answer? 4i. Perfect. All right, let's move to 19. I have the square root of -48. So it's -1 times, break up 48. 16 and 3. Could you have done 6 and 8? Yes. Could you do 12 and 4? Yes. The only problem was that it's not the biggest perfect square, so you'd have to kind of simplify a couple times. But what is the square root of -1? I. What is the square root of 16? 4. What happens with 3? It stays underneath. So your answer is 4i square roots of 3. Questions? Get in the habit, guys, of writing every -1 times 100 times 5. If you break it up a different way, 50 and 10, okay, fine. Then you got to break up 50. And then I try to get the biggest perfect square and smallest non-perfect square. But what is the square root of -1? I. What's the square root of 100? 10. And what happens with your 5? It stays underneath. So you have 10i square root 5. All right, don't get tripped up on something like 21. What do you notice about 21? There's a negative on the outside, and there's also one where? On the inside. That negative, guys, is just multiplying your answer by -1. Keep it out front. Leave it out there. So then break up. I have -1 times, what can I break 80 into? 16 and 5, perfect. So what is the square root of -1? I, good. What's the square root of 16? 4, and then 5 stays where? Underneath. So what is my answer here? Perfect. -4i square root of 5. Good. Good job. Questions, anybody?
About the one with 16.
Say it again.
About the one with
Okay, what's your question? All right, guys, common mistake. A very common mistake. Don't write this down, but a common mistake. What happens when you multiply a square root that's exactly the same?
It's the same but without the square.
Okay, so you guys would tell me that this would be what? -7, okay. Another thing, a common thing that people do, you would say, okay, a square root, it's 2 square roots, right? So can I rewrite it under 1? So -7 times -7 equals what? 49. So my answer here would be 7. That is not true. When you guys are simplifying negatives underneath the radical, you have to pull what out first? The I. You have to pull the I out first. The square root of -7 is the same as I square root of 7. If you want to write it out like this, -1 times 7, perfect, and then -1 times 7. So I have times I square root of 7. Once you pull out the negatives, you can then simplify. When you're multiplying or dividing, you have to pull the negative out first. So anything on the outside, we can multiply together. What's I times I? I squared, okay. Times, what's 7 times 7? 49. I'm going to write all the steps out. So now I say, all right, do I ever have an I squared in my answer? No. What does I squared equal? -1. And what is the square root of 49? 7. So what is -1 times 7? -7. Get in the habit, ladies and gents, of pulling the negative out first. Now, there is a bunch of different ways you can simplify. Some people see things, they break down, like here, they break down 6 into 2 and 3, and they break down 10 into 5 and 2, and then combine it, whatever. Whatever you guys want to do, you all know how to simplify radicals. But the biggest thing is to take out the negative first. So in 23, remember, this is -1 times 6 under the radical, and this is -1 times 10. So I have i's that I have to take out here. It's I root 6 times I root 10. Yeah.
For number 22, if it's equal to -7, can't you just do that, like, -7 times -7?
Yes, in a sense you can, but you need to get in the habit of taking the i's out. You'll see why. As the problems get a little more complex, if some of them have a negative underneath the radical, some of them don't, then you can't cancel if they're not the same underneath. So just get in the habit of doing that, yeah.
Okay.
So let's go ahead here, guys. What's I times I? I squared, and then 6 times 10 is 60. All right, we took the negative out from underneath the radical, so I can now replace I squared with what number? -1, good. And how can I break down 60? 4 times 15, okay. What's the square root of 4? 2, that comes out, and then I multiply 2 times -1. So I have -2 square root of 15. All right, what do I have to get into the habit of doing right now? First, take out that negative. Get in the habit. So it's I, and then I have 20 underneath, and then I have I, and then I have 2 underneath. You can do this one of two ways, guys. First of all, what do you notice about the i's on the outside? They cancel because you took them both out. Got one on top, one on the bottom. Can I divide 20 divided by 2 right now? Why not?
It's because you have to take out the radical from the denominator.
Aren't they both underneath the radical? So yeah, this was like second week of school. If I have a number that's underneath the radical, I could rewrite this as the square root of 20 over 2, can I? What's 20 divided by 2? So square root 10. If you have one number that's inside of a radical and one that's not, then you have to rationalize. But if they're both underneath the radical, just go ahead and do the division. What's 20 divided by 2? 10. So you have the square root of 10. If you wanted to, you could have rationalized square root of 2 on top and bottom. Then you'd be left with square root of 40 over 2. Then you have to simplify and all that. But you'll get the same thing. But you have to work smarter, guys. Some of you get your quizzes and your tests. You're like, it's so easy when you do it or when we go by each section. And then when you have everything in front of you and it just says, do it, we get confused. We don't know which way to go. So you've got to, whatever works with your brain, you guys have to think about. But simplifying, there's a million different ways you can simplify. Yeah.
How do you get the square root of 10?
What's 20 divided by 2?
Yes, it's 10, but...
Okay. Questions like 25 and beyond. This is why we've got to pay attention. Guys, you're dividing an imaginary number by a real number. Do you see that? You can't just say here 48 divided by 24 because one is imaginary and one is real. So what do we have to do first? Take out the negative. So this becomes I square root of 48 over the square root of 24. Now can you simplify those two things? Yes. What's 48 divided by 24? So this just becomes I square root of 2. If you wanted to, you could say I. What can I break 48 into? 16 and 3. What can you break 24 into? 6 and 4. 8 and 3. What do you guys want to do? Okay, let me do 8 and 3 first. Watch if I do 8 and 3. What can I cancel here? The 3's, and then what's 16 divided by 2? So, 16 divided by 8 too. So same answer here. So say you did this. You did 16 times 3, and then here you did 4 and 6, right? So you'd have square root of 16 is 4I root 3 over this would be 2 square root of 6. There's a lot of simplifying to do here. What do you have to simplify on the outside? Okay, so this becomes a 2, this becomes a 1. And then what do you have to do? Can you leave radical 6 in the denominator? No, you'd have to simplify here. So you'd have 2I square root of 18 over 6. And then we got to simplify. So I'm trying to show you guys that this will get you to where you need to go. But it's going to take a lot longer than right here at the beginning when we realized, oh, I have two reals that are both underneath the radical. Just divide. We just did that one problem 3 different ways. You want to try to work smarter, not harder, okay? All right, let's check this one out. What do we need to do first? Take out the I. -1 times 5 times -1 times 15. So I have I root 5 times I root 15. Multiply the stuff on the outside. I times I is I squared. Okay, are there any hidden perfect squares in 5 and 15? No, so what should I do? Multiply them together. What's 5 times 15? 75. They're both underneath the radical, so you can do that. Can I do anything else here? What's this I squared going to give me? So I have -1, and then what can I break 75 into? 25 and 3. Good. What is the square root of 25? So what's 5 times -1? -5 square roots of what? 3. What is I times I? -1. I squared is -1. What is the square root of -1? I. It's the biggest thing from this lesson, guys. All right, 27. What do I do first? Take out that I. So it's I root 70 over I root 7. Do we see how there's an I in the numerator, I in the denominator? What happens? They cancel. Do you see how root 70 and root 7, they're both underneath the square root? So can we divide? What's 70 divided by 7? So I have the square root of 10. Uh-huh. What does I squared equal? You got to remember that, Alec. I squared equals -1. Anytime you have an I squared, it equals -1.
About 22, isn't there I squared? I didn't see that.
I times I gave you I squared. No worries. All right, 28. Don't get fooled on something like this, guys. What do you notice? Do they both have a negative? No, only one of them does. So go ahead and take it out first. Take out that negative. So you have I root 40 over the square root of 20. You are welcome to break 40 up. You're welcome to break 20 up and then simplify from there. But we need to see, I have the square root of 40 divided by square root of 20. What can I do with those two? I can go ahead and divide. So what happens here? I get I times the square root of what? I times square root of what? There you go. Some of you will take very little time in this quiz. Some of you won't finish it because you take the long way to do things. We've got to find the path of least resistance. Dylan, you with me? Okay, let's look at 29. Guys, what are you doing at 29? Are we adding or are we multiplying? We're multiplying. Okay, I have some imaginaries and I have some reals. But you're going to have to see, guys, on your quiz, it's just going to say simplify or evaluate. Some of them are going to be adding, some or subtracting. Some of them are going to be multiplying. So you have to recognize the difference. So let's go ahead and simplify here. I'm going to take out an I. And I'm going to leave this as a square root of 12. Times, I'm going to take out an I, and I'm going to leave this as a square root of 6. I'm going to put this over the square root of 8. I'm going to do this a couple different ways so you guys can see. Okay, another way I could simplify this is I times I is I squared, right? And what's 12 times 6? 72, okay, over the square root of 8. Everybody with me? Okay? So I'm going to simplify. I squared is -1. I have a square root divided by a square root. What is 72 divided by 8? Okay. What is the square root of 9? And what's 3 times -1? -3.
You can also say that 9 times 8 is 72 and then do the square root of 8.
Yep.
divided by 8, right?
Yep.
Alright.
You could have said, okay, I have I, and then broke this down to 4 times 3 times I, and this is going to be 3 times 2, right? And then this is going to be 4 times 2. Could I do that? Okay, so I have I times I is going to give me I squared. And then I have a 4 underneath the radical on the top and a 4 underneath the radical on the bottom. I have a 2 underneath the radical on the top and a 2 on the bottom. And then what is 3 times 3? I squared is -1. The square root of 9 is 3. And I get -3. Don't forget how to math, guys. The simplification behind this is really simple. It's understanding that you have to take out the negative and what happens when you remove the negative, that it becomes an I. And then when you multiply 2 i's together, it becomes I squared, which is -1. Those sorts of things. Are we okay? All right, let's do a couple more. And then we're going to do a concept that's really odd that you guys haven't seen. But I'll simplify it for you. It won't be so bad. All right, look at the difference between 30 and 31. What's the difference between 30 and 31? One of them you're multiplying, one of them you're adding. Rules change, guys, between multiplication and addition. So pay attention here. I have -8. I'm going to just rewrite -8 here times. Let's talk about -128. It's -1 times. Anybody know the biggest perfect square in 128? Bigger. 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 64. You guys are like, oh my gosh. Just multiply 2 together a whole bunch of times. And then I have over 4. Can I simplify the -8 and the 4 right now? Am I allowed to simplify right here? Right now? Yes. How come? Because they're not attached. Why are they not attached? Because what are we doing here? We're multiplying. If there was a plus sign, could I do that? No, you guys have got to pay attention. So again, at any point here, multiplication, you want to simplify, go ahead. I'm going to leave it like it is, and then I'm going to go ahead and simplify my radical. What can I take out of the radical? 8 what? 8i. I have a -1 underneath there, so 8i. So I'm going to rewrite this as -8 times 8i root 2 over 4. Again, we are multiplying. You can go ahead and simplify at any point you want to. I'm going to keep going. What's -8 times +8? Okay, so -64i root 2 over 4. Can I simplify these two? Yes. What is -64 divided by 4? So it's -16i square root of 2. If you forget the I in that answer, if it's a 10-point question, you're getting 8 points off. Major, major, major mistake, guys. But understand, at any point during this problem, I could have said this is 4 and this is -2. Look what happens. What's -2 times 8i? -16. The reason you can simplify at any point, as long as it's out of the radical, is because we're multiplying. Like Chase said, it's not attached. You get attached with a plus or a minus sign, not multiplication. So here, 31's a little different. I have -9 plus, break up 18. -1 times what? 9 and 2, good. Over 3. So let's keep simplifying. I have -9 plus, what's the square root of -1? I. What's the square root of 9? 3. Why did I write that? Hold on. So what did I pull out? 3i, root 2 stays underneath, over 3. Is that simplified? No. Can I do this? No, that's against the law. You guys cannot do that. What do we have to do first? Let's factor out the GCF in the top. It's a complex number. I have a real part and imaginary part. That's fine. What do they have in common? A 3. If I divide out a 3, I'm left with what? Negative 3 plus I square root of 2 over 3. Can I now simplify here? Yes. So your answer is just negative 3 plus I root 2. Do you have to simplify? Yes. Don't ask that question. If you don't simplify, you're not going to get full credit. You guys have to simplify. Again, what are we doing in 32? Are we adding or are we multiplying? Adding. So pay attention. I'm going to simplify. I'm going to write this as 5 plus, and I have negative 1 times what? What am I going to break 25 into? 25 and 2 over 10. Perfect. So what are we going to take out here? What's the square root of negative 1? I. Good. What's the square root of 25? 5. So I have 5 plus 5i square root of 2 over 10. What is the GCF of the numerator? What do they both have in common? A 5. So I'm going to take out a 5, and I'm left with 1 plus I root 2 over 10. And then what can I simplify there? The 5, and this becomes a 2. So it's 1 plus I root 2 over 2. You get a question like this on WebAssign, they're probably going to want it like this. Because they just, I don't know, like to make you do extra work. So that's what you guys think. All right, last slide. This is not something you guys have seen before. If you watched my video from last year, I teach this differently. But I was talking to Miss Corey today, and I like the way she does it, so I'm going to do it like that. I think it simplifies it a little more. There is a calculator button on your TI-80, whatever's you guys have. It's usually on the decimal point. And you can just plug this in. After the test, we're going to show you how to do that because you guys don't, I mean, you can figure it out now, but you guys aren't allowed calculators on the quiz of the test. But as far as standardized tests go, you'll see stuff like this in the SAT, so it's good to know how to use your calculator. But let's talk about this. We have discussed, we have talked about, we have said, make sure you pay attention. You know this. I squared equals what? Negative 1. So what we're going to do to evaluate this and see what our answers are is we're going to break the exponent down into an even number and then divide by 2. I'll explain in a second. Your answers are either going to be 1, negative 1, I, or negative I. If you have a negative exponent, you could have a fraction as an answer, but those are going to be your only 4 options. You'll see what I mean by that in a second. So if I had, let's just say I have I to the 9th power, and it says to evaluate, simplify. I want to break this down into an even exponent and an odd exponent. So do you guys agree I could write this as I to the 8th power times I to the 1st power? Okay? Any odd number, you can break it down into an even and then a plus 1, pretty much. So you're like, okay, why? Why did you do that? Well, let's break down our even exponent using this right here. I squared. Take your even exponent and divide it by 2. What's 8 divided by 2? 4. Do you guys agree with me that I squared raised to the 4th power is the same as I to the 8th? Okay. And now you're like, why? I don't understand why you're doing this. Well, what does I squared equal? Negative 1. Can we evaluate negative 1 to the 4th power? What's any negative number raised to an even power? Positive. So what's negative 1 to the 4th power? 1. So what's my answer here? Just I. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our exponent. The first step is to break it down to an even and an odd. Then you take the even, divide it by 4, because that'll give you how you get your I squareds. We're going to do a bunch of these. You're going to be like, oh, okay, not bad. All right, so I to the 5th. Is this an even exponent or an odd? Okay, so I'm going to break it down. What am I going to break it down into? I to the 4th times what? I to the 1st, okay. Now, what do we do with our even exponent? Divide it by what? Okay, so I'm going to say I squared raised to what power? To the second power. Do you guys agree that 2 to the second power would give you I to the fourth? Okay, so times I. Well, what does I squared equal? Negative 1 squared times I. What is negative 1 squared? What's negative 1 squared? 1. So what's my answer here? Just I. All right, look at 34. Is this even or odd? Oh, it's already even. Okay, so that's easy. I'm going to take my I squared. So take your exponent and divide it by 2. So it would be I squared to the what? 16th power. Right? 2 times 16 is 32. So replace I squared with negative 1. What is negative 1 to the 16th power? Guys, what's any number raised to an even power? It's going to be even or odd. I mean, positive or negative? Positive. So if I have negative 1 raised to the 16th power, my answer is just positive 1. Uh-huh. Because you have I squared raised to the 16th power, negative 1.
I thought it was just negative I.
No, it's okay. All right, let's look at, yeah. Shh, guys, shush.
Wouldn't I to the square of any even number be 1?
Yeah. If it's divisible by 4. You'll see in a minute. Hang on. All right, look at 33. What can I break 33 into? I to the what? I to the 32nd times I to the first. So then we're going to break this one down, and we're going to say I squared. Well, what are we going to raise it to? Divide 32 by 2 and get what? 16 times I. So this is negative 1 to the 16th power times I. What's negative 1 to the 16th power? Just 1, so your answer here is I. Last period, like, so everything is just I? No. Yeah. Can you wait 2 more minutes? I'm almost done. Okay, how's this one a tad bit different? Oh, it's a negative exponent. So what do we have to remember to do if I have a negative exponent? It needs to go to the denominator. You're going to have a fraction. So this is 1 over I to the 16th. Now we do the exact same thing. 16 is already even, so I'm just going to rewrite this as I squared. I'm going to divide this by 2 to what power? 8th, good. So we're going to keep going, and we're going to say I to the negative 1 to the 8th power. What's negative 1 to the 8th power? 1, and 1 over 1 is 1. All right, here's where this one gets a little trickier. Last 2, and then we're done. Big deal, it's a big number, who cares? I have a negative exponent though, so how do I need to rewrite this? 1 over I to the 101. What am I going to break 101 into? Okay, I to the 100th times I to the first. You can write the 1. Everybody with me? Okay, so now I'm going to go a little more, and I'm going to break this down into I squared. And I'm going to raise it to the what power? To the 50th, okay. And then I'm going to times that by I to the first. Everybody with me? I'm going to do this right here. Negative 1. You can't see that. Hang on. Negative 1 to the 50th power gives you what? Okay. So I have 1 over I. Is that acceptable? Are we allowed to have i's in the denominator, guys? No. So how do you think I get rid of that I? Multiply what? The top and bottom by I. We've got to rationalize. All these colors. I squared to the 50th power would be negative 1 to the 50th, which would just be 1. So we're going to rationalize. You are not allowed to have i's in the denominator. So when I rationalize, I have 1 times I, which is I, over I squared. Well, what does I squared equal, guys? -1. So it's I over -1. So what's your answer? Negative I. If you left it as I over -1, not a big deal, but understand you're not allowed to have what in the denominator? You're not allowed to have i's. So make sure if you end up with one, you get rid of it. Last one, and then Janelle, you can go. I have a negative exponent. Guys, this is a really simple problem. Don't mess it up. How do I rewrite that? God bless. How do I rewrite it? 1 over. Okay, so 1 over I to the 102. We love the fact that it's already even. So I'm going to rewrite this as I squared, and then I'm going to take my exponent and divide by 2. What's 102 divided by 2? 51. Oh, uh-oh. Okay. So I have 1 over, let's take -1, and we're going to raise it to the 51st power. Every time we've done this, we've raised -1 to an even power and gotten what? 1. If you raise a negative number to an odd power, what does it stay? Negative. So this is 1 over -1, so your answer is -1. Go ahead, Janelle. If you raise a negative number to an even power, your answer, your product is even. If you raise a negative number to an odd power, it's going to be odd. So just pay attention to little stuff. Alec. All right, you guys okay? All right, so on Canvas, there is an assignment that says web assign 1.5 A and B. So just submit your assignment because your whole web assign on the actual web assign is together. So I just made it one submission. So if you've already submitted to one, just make sure it's submitted to the assignment.